Hey guys, this is Zlewikk and welcome back to Team to Talk. So, dev diaries for not yet announced game, Project Ceasar, but at this point we all know it's EU5. Today is another mega interesting dev diary. After talking about exploration last week, today we'll talk much farther into combat. There was a dev diary 11 dev diaries ago about units and their organization, and based on that we remember there are a few different unit types. The regiment size will be different across different years of the game, and when they explain how the system will work in the Project Ceasar, they're saying base is what we've seen in the previous EU games, but on top of that they took an influence from different games. So combat and organization from March of the Eagles, nobody knows what was there, ideas of connection between regiment and pops from Victoria, and logistics and automation from Imperator. And logistics and automation from Imperator was pretty cool. I remember there were special units responsible for the logistics there. By automation, I think it's what they mean by how the provinces will be occupied, the locations. Remember, there's thousands of locations, so we probably don't want to siege all of them. So I assume it's gonna be similar to Imperator, where you siege down a fort or a key location, and that's gonna occupy the whole province or multiple locations around. Regiments can be recruited in any location you have built the infrastructure to allow recruitment in. Levies can be raised in any province capital, and mercenaries in any capital city or town. While regular regiments go as low as 100 men at the start of the game, levies, which fight much less efficiently, can be organized up to 1,000 per regiment from the start. But, for example, the Chinese having a levy regiments of the 1,500 at the start. Why does it like this? Well, it's pretty much to reorganize amount of the regiments that you have to handle, and that's probably also for the game to go faster, because you dealing with 1,800 regiments, it's not fun, and it's not even fun for the player. You might have seen that in my MP games in EU4, how it looks like when you have that many regiments. Very importantly, the combat system will not work like in Victoria 3. You'll be able to control specific armies, move them, and tell them what to do, and also reorganize them freely like in EU4. What's very also crucial knowledge that you're learning here, that there won't be day tick, but there will be hour sticks in the game, which I think it's insane, because the game is supposed to be from 1337 to like 1820 or something like that, to Napoleonic era, so almost 500 years, and also not with day ticks but also hour ticks. Insane how long it might be played, but Johan is saying that it won't be that bad. It will be very similar to what it is right now, and the day ticks will be between 8 AM and 7 PM, so the night will just not exist in game. As they say, oh, the armies will just rest at that time. That's what Johan is saying. Now some may be worried that the game will be slower and perform worse. Well, when you fight a war and you care about it, you probably play at slower speed, but at max speed the game should be as fast as EU4 or Imperator. According to this, you keep the same speed as you had in different games, but if you want to go more granular and slower to micromanage stuff, you can do that. And that's another thing that they're teasing. So in the military tab, you'll see there will be control of your armies, navies, but also objectives. So it's a powerful objective system that uses the same AI components as the AI itself uses. I'm really curious how it's gonna work. Let me know in the comments what you think these objectives will be. An army is a group of regiments that are organized in a single entity, so we call it a stack in EU4. This can be led by a character who may or may not have traits for being a general, and that's a really interesting difference compared to EU4, where general could have a fire, shock, maneuver and siege. Here, remember, characters have different stats: admin, diplo, and mill, and these stats will impact multiple things, and more than the general stats impacted in EU4. So, you know, these characters are not separate like they were in EU4, where generals were separate and, let's say, advisors were separate. Here they are the same group of the characters from which you can choose to the both cases. And you see that admin ability of a general are impacting army maintenance, siege ability, possible frontage, you'll see what frontage is later, and correct section chance. It's also a new modifier. Diplomatic skill impacts morale, initiative, which is also a new stuff, and unit food consumption. Finally, military impacts army movement speed, discipline, and combat speed, which is another new metric that will be explained later. You remember, in EU4 we had just 2 rows of the armies, and that's it. In EU5 you see that there will be different formations to be used, and the units can be placed in one of the 4 places. Well, EU4 had 3 because we can't reserve there as well. So it's either middle, so the center of the army, and I think that's what the gold ones is telling us. This is the middle. They could be on the left flank, like these guys. They could be on right flank, like these guys, or they could be in the reserves, which I think the silver thing is telling us about. And we are referring this not as a rows like in EU4, but rather sections. This will be called sections in EU5. And obviously UI is very much work in progress, like in each of the areas, so I assume and hope this will improve over time. So how does combat work? In EU4 we have 2 phases, fire and shock. Here's just one main phase that is ongoing, but there are gonna be different stuff happening in that main phase, and the dice is rerolled as frequently, so probably also per hour or per a few hours. We'll see that later. So interestingly, the battle will start with a bombard phase, which is not a main phase, it's just like a pre-phase of the battle, where any unit that can bombard, which is basically only artillery units, will be able to fire on the opposing army. The artillery will be able to damage units in the opposing section, so your left flank fires on the enemies on the right flank, etc. If there are no units in the opposing section, it can fire at any section that is not the reserves. Then, after this pre-phase, so bombard phase, we go to the main phase of the battle, where you see that each section tries to get as many units to engage at their maximum frontage allows. So frontage is what we call a combat width in EU4, so how many units can be actually deployed in the sections. Most of the time, every regiment has the same frontage value. They will attack at the opposing section until there is no possible units left there, and then they will hit enemies in the closest section. Very similarly to EU4, except some units apparently will take more than one spot in the frontage. We'll probably get to know that later. Only engaged regiments will fight in the current round of the combat. Like in EU4, reserves do not fight, and a regiment will try to fight another engaged regiment in the opposing section. Same as in EU4. If there is none in an opposite section, they can attack the other sections where a unit with a good flanking ability can do extra damage. So I think that might be actually stronger than what we have in EU4 currently, but obviously we have to get into practice. If there is no opposing unit engaged, they will damage the morale of all regiments in that section. So how does a regiment engage then? Well, at each tick, they roll a dice and check against their initiative, and if they succeed, then they will become engaged. So does it mean that at the start of the battle not all of troops will be deployed at the battlefield, but they will be deployed depending on the rolls to become engaged? Or does it mean that the units that are in one of the sections are not engaged immediately, but they need to roll a dice to start engaging the other units? I think it's the other thing that I mentioned. This chance increases for every hour of combat. This will make you want to have every section of your army to have units that can engage quickly, to allow you heavy hitters to get enough time to engage. Now this may not always be an option, especially in an early game when your selection of units is rather raw. So some units will be engaging faster and some slower, which is expected. This is also like in EU4, so with every hour, it was days in EU4, every unit, both in the battlefield and reserves, will be having a ticking penalty to their morale, which is exactly the same. A regiment that gets low morale will break and leave their section until the end of the combat, and will be in the broken unit section, so the units that fleed, like in EU4 when they're out of the battlefield, but they are still in the battle, just neither in the reserves, neither in the actual rows. If there are not enough regiments on a section to cover the frontage, there will be a chance for units in the reserve to reinforce that section. So it will be pretty much like with cannons in EU4 right now. So the cannons disappeared from the back row because they lost morale. It's not like the full row is being replaced like in the old patches, but every day there's a chance for some units to join that row. It will work the same with the sections in EU5. The battle is over when one side has no regiments in their front sections, or the army retreats due to no morale on the manual order to retreat. Exactly the same as in EU4. So as Johan said, most of the stuff will work like in EU4, but there are small tweaks to make it more interesting. And why you play a new game if it works like the old one? There needs to be some changes for you to learn, and we all know that learning stuff is one of the most fun things to do in EU games. That's how the, I think, stats of the army in the battle will look like. So see, I think there's some murals of left flank, center and right flank. How many regiments, or like how many people are, yeah, these are people, not regiments for sure. 240, 500, 400. These are regiments, 4 regiments, 4 regiments, 3 regiments. I think so that these are regiments. How many are in reserves? How many are broken? So it actually is gonna be clearer, much clearer to see compared to EU4, where you had to hover on a specific unit type to see this. The discipline and military tactics. And here's the explanation of the new attributes that we'll be seeing in this game. Combat speed is how quickly units can move up from the reserve section to fill the holes in another section. Frontage, there's amount of regiments that can fight in each section. And what is important, topology and vegetation can reduce this. Like in old times in EU4, well, in the mountains, you had like half of the combat width. It's not there anymore, and it's gonna make it interesting in EU5. Some units may require more or less frontage. At the start of the game, a regular 100-man sized regiment uses the same frontage as 3.6 thousand men in Napoleonic era. That's how they are handling how big of an armies will be at the late game. Something that is pain in EU4 to manage 1 million troops. Well, you will manage 1 million troops in EU5, but that won't be 1,000 regiments. Right? That would be like 200 and ish regiments instead. And finally, initiative, how quickly a unit can engage as soon as the combat starts. Lighter units have a higher initiative by default. Next week we'll talk about logistics and sieges, but first, let's take a look at the comment section. Since PC now simulates hours in a day as ticks, will there be any representation of seasonal day length variation? If it's in the winter, say Russia wouldn't that mean that armies have less daylight hours? No, that would be too complex, and that's what Johan is saying as well. Does this mean that you can use different leaders on mid flanks and reserve like in March of the Eagles? What happens when you use force march? Is there a possibility to use different tactics like you can in HOI4 or in Imperator, right? No, we have only 1 leader per army, which I think is like good solution from previous EU games, and some leaders would add quite a lot of characters to game. That's fine in wargame like March of the Eagles or Hearts of Iron. Tactics was something we had in Imperator, and even after 5 iterations it sucked. Also, there won't be tactics. That's a confirmation. If I recall correctly, discipline here works similar to EU4. In that case, it seems that having good commander will be really crucial for winning battles. Yeah, but not just that stats, they are all very important. Can units get experience like Victoria Tour and EU4 and Imperator? Yes. So it's gonna be like what? In EU4? Specific metric in EU4. Drilling? Army tradition? Army professionalism? Because none of this is really like experience, right? How long does your average battle last, given the increased ticks, as long as EU4, shorter or longer? About 20% less ticks right now than in EU4. Really interesting. But keep in mind, ticks in EU4 are days, ticks in EU5 are hours. Around the day, when it's gonna be much lower in time in days compared to EU4. So the longest time span of any Pyros game and hours as small as ticks, there should be a free DLC as a reward for those that actually reach the end date. The key is to make the game fun and challenging during these 500 years, not just a world conquest in 500 years and get bored. You said previously that battles will be more decisive now, an idea I like very much, and info how that will be done. More war score from battles, less cap on war score from battles, something we do in our EU4 MP mods. Dead soldiers equals dead people, so you also have less pops, you don't have as many resources to run a long-term war. Does this military tactics work like in EU4? I think it was explained in the old there. Yes, they are pretty much the same. How do stack wipes work? Do reinforcing armies get a penalty to initiative? Reinforcing armies end up with their regiments in the reserves box, so the chance of actually joining the battle has another impact first as well. So to summarize, we get CK2 system of 3 sections and HOI4 reinforcing of combat. I assume that the damage dealing will be related to dice rolling, so EU4 Victoria 2 stuff. And old EU4 combat width dependent on terrain. Nice, that's what I mentioned. Yeah, good description, keeping the core while adding things we know will improve it. I was hoping for something like this, holy cow! And with ticks representing hours, we've also solved the weeks-long battles of earlier games. Weeks? You could run a battle in for years! That is one of the advantages, yes. EU4 units get experience, the drilling mechanics added it, yes, it's not really experience from battles, come on. It's just shooting in the air. Confirmation that there will be horse archers and some of their statistics. Sealand saying that CAF flanking ability is not really used for EU4 as it could be. And Johansen, except for the time as section has problem, but yes, it's not as powerful as it should be. I have some ideas though, so it is supposed to be stronger in EU5. Confirmation that 344 is the regiments, and then the bigger numbers are amount of men, what I also mentioned. Is there any sort of visual on how those sections work in game? Yes, but the UI is like boxes at the moment, so like in EU4. You can drill regiments, but it's something that you unlock with an advance with the technology. You can create new subject state from any province you own, and you should be able to make specific person its ruler. Yes, that's interesting. Are there any plans for a nice immersive graphical representation of the actual battle? Hell yes, it's probably not there yet. Okay guys, I think that's gonna be all for today. Really interesting dev diary, and honestly I like the combination of the different stuff, but it's just all in theory. I need to see it in practice to give you my honest opinion, if I like it or not. So I'm really looking forward to see some recordings, Mr. Johan. There's a new channel, right? On YouTube. It should be used for promotion of EU5. But guys, thank you so much for today. Remember to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. And of course, subscribe to the channel to get notified about the next Tinto Talks. Bye bye!